Today, I want to go over um, the Anti-Defamation League's introduction to the protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, the infamous fraud that caused the death of 80 million people in the 1930s and the 1940s. This is what happened in the 1930s and the 1940s is a classic example when a good chunk of civilization believes the lie because they think it's fun to believe the lie. And before I do, just a reminder as to what brought us here to begin with lately is that there is a sizable chunk of the American population that are being swayed by the likes of Louis Farrakhan, who is teaching out of this heinous book and deceiving and brainwashing an entire race of people here in the United States. It's bad enough that there are too many white people, as they say, listening or reading that garbage and believing it, but then you have a majority of the black population doing the same thing. So once again, Philadelphia Inquirer, Eagles' Deshaun Jackson apologizes for anti-Semitic posts that he'll do better than educate myself. Eagles wide receiver Deshaun Jackson apologized twice Tuesday for his recent Instagram posts in which he praised Louis Farrakhan and shared a text that included a fake Adolf Hitler quote. And the thing that really burns me is nobody in the media, not even Max Kellerman. Max Kellerman, you should hang your head in shame for not pointing out where this foolish quote came from. You are a Jew, Max. You have the bully pulpit. You get paid by ESPN. You can do it. I don't get paid for doing this, but I'm going to do it. Jackson's first attempt of the day to explain and express remorse. See, the problem is you can't explain what he said. You can't sit here and say, well, I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. You did. You did mean it. And disavowed any approval of Hitler. But where is the disavowal of approval of Louis Farrakhan, who quotes from this vile book I'm going to talk about today? So, he says, I really didn't understand what this passage was saying. Sure you did. You think Louis Farrakhan is a great man. Don't sit here and tell us you didn't understand. Look, you got a college education, man. You understand what's going on. So Jackson wrote, Hitler caused terrible pain to the Jewish people like the pain African Americans have suffered. No, you don't get it. Hitler was just the tip of the iceberg. This thing of attempting to exterminate the Jews for over 1,000 years. This has been going on, and nearly succeeding several times, has not happened to, as you say, the African American people. So he says we should together be fighting anti-Semitism and racism. Why then didn't you disavow Louis Farrakhan? In the accompanying video, Jackson said, in part, I post things in my story all the time, and it just probably never should. Once again. No, you absolutely should have never even thought about posting such things. Not probably. Posted anything that Hitler not did, but said in reference to accusations against Jews. Because Hitler was a bad person? As I pointed out in the last video, there are a lot of bad people in this world, and they never did anything remotely compared to what Hitler did. And he says, and I know that I was just trying to uplift African American and slavery and just enlighten my people. So you want to go and lift up your people, and by doing that, stomping on the Jews. That sounds like what Hitler did. Lifted up his people by stomping on the Jews. In the Nuremberg trials, folks who were hanged came up with better excuses than yours. Now I'm going to go to this particular, like I said, on the Anti-Defamation League website, A Hoax of Hate, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. Introduction. The Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion is a classic in paranoid racist literature, taken by the gullible, that would be you, Deshaun Jackson, and Louis Farrakhan, and you too, Shannon Sharp, as the confidential minutes of a Jewish conclave convened in the last years of the 19th century. It has been heralded by anti-Semites as proof that Jews are plotting to take over the world. Since its contrivance around the turn of the century by the Russian Okhrana or Tsarist secret police, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion has taken root in a frightened minds around the world, including yours, Deshaun Jackson, Louis Farrakhan, and those who stick up for that kind of ignorance, stupidity. The booklet's 24-sections spell out the alleged secret plans of the Jewish leaders seeking to attain world domination. They represent the most notorious political forgery of modern times. Although thoroughly discredited, the document is still being used to stir up anti-Semitic hatred. Well, guess where it's being used right now to stir up anti-Semitic hatred? Do you want me to spell it out? The origins of the protocols. Sergei Nilus, a little-known Tsarist official in Moscow, edited several editions of the protocols, each with different account of how he discovered the document. So he made it up. He made it all up. In his 1911 edition, Nilus claimed that his source had stolen the document from a non-existent Zionist headquarters in France. So y'all gonna believe this stuff, huh? Y'all rather believe the lie, huh? Other editors of the protocols maintain that the document was read at the first Zionist Congress held in 1897 in Basel, Switzerland. Let me go to a scripture real quick, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen to those who prefer to believe the lie instead of the truth. Second Thessalonians 2 and verse 12. Oh, what am I doing reading out of Paul when I'm wearing this? Well, for those of you who hate the words of Paul, let me urge you to read Romans 11, especially verses 26, verses 26, 27, 28. Read that. Then come back to me and tell me that Paul hated Jews. Strong's Concordance. See, the King James Version of this is a lie, by the way, in case y'all didn't realize it, because the real Messiah, his name is Yehoshua. He has a Hebrew name, not a Greek or a Roman or an English name, which this right here is a Greek, Roman, and an English name. That is not a Hebrew name. And for this cause, Jehovah will send them strong delusion. Well, isn't that the description of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion? Isn't that the description of Martin Luther's damnable book, Martin Luther, the father of Protestantism? Well, that covers about half the United States, doesn't it? Also wrote a book called To the Jews and Their Lies. Both of these books brought strong delusion to the Christians. That they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned, who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Well, doesn't that just describe Martin Luther and his vile, heinous book? And these Russians, these czarist Russians, these cross-wearing czarist Russians, who told a bald-faced lie and wrote it down and spread it around all over the world. You see this? That they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And this word in Greek is adikia, which means also injustice. Well, a great, great, great injustice was perpetrated upon the Jews because of the lie. Because of that, those who wrote that book, those who believed that book, are damned. Not my words. Words of Paul. And let's go to Romans 11, just to make sure everyone understands that Paul was not an anti-Semite. Paul was a Jew himself. Paul excoriated the Romans for hating the Jews. We'll start in verse 17. If some of the branches, 12 branches, were broken off, some of them, and you, Roman, being of a wild olive tree, were grafted in and replaced them, is that what it says? That's what you teach in your churches. That's what you teach in your churches. Every one of them. You teach that the church replaces Israel. That is also the lie that's going to get people damned. We're grafted in with them. And I know you're going to say, well, Henry, don't say in, on, at, by, whatever. Let's read the next word. And partaking jointly. Whoops. There goes your false narrative about the church replacing Israel. Straight down the toilet where it belongs. Jointly. That was what was prescribed. I believe it was Genesis 6. Yes, the sons of Japheth. We'll go there once again. I know I'm doing this over and over and over, but it's necessary. Was it 6? No, it was 9, I believe. All right. Genesis 9. What did Noah say when he passed out blessings? Blessed be Jehovah, Elohim of Japheth. Is that what it says? Does not. Does not say any such thing. The Elohim of Shem. And Canaan will be his servant. Elohim will enlarge in other words, they will have the most amount of land out of all 3 of them. Which means when Jehovah comes back to his people, they are the ones that are responsible for the well-being of the heirs of Shem, the Jew. And they have been irresponsible. They have been unjust with the Jew. But he was supposed to share jointly in the tents of Shem of that olive tree, like Paul said. And it does not say, hold on, show me where it says Elohim of Japheth. It does not. That blessing went to Shem. And it went from Shem to Abraham, then to Yitzhak, then to Israel. That's how it went. Partake jointly with them of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Boast not against the branches, but you boasted. O Roman Christian, you boasted. Because if you boast, you don't bear the root, but the root bears you. But you will say, the branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off, but as we see in the coming verses, that was only temporary. Just like the taking of the Jews into Babylon was only temporary. So this right here is only temporary. And you Gentiles stand by faith. Do not be high-minded, but fear. Is there any fear coming from the Gentile today concerning the Jew? No, there is none. There will be. There will be lots of it. And for many it will be too late. For if Jehovah spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not you. That's Paul's warning. Warning to the Romans not to mistreat the Jews. Behold the severity and the goodness of Jehovah on them which shall severity, but toward you goodness. If. Yes, they got the if. In means if you continue in his goodness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. And they, not if, Ehen may. It says before. Before the double negative, which is, how do I say this? It says before they abide not still in unbelief. That means before they actually believe, they're going to be saved. Why? Because their salvation, or saving them, is going to cause them to believe. As it is written in Ezekiel 39. I know some of you folks get tired of hearing me say this over and over and over again, but I'm going to keep saying it over and over and over again until one of two things happens. Until I'm dead, or until the kingdom comes in Zion. Because they, before they abide in belief. See the double negative here? It says, abide not still in unbelief. In English, we would say, before they abide in belief, they will be grafted in. They're going to be grafted in first, and then they're going to believe. You can sit here and shake your head and say, that's not what Jesus said. Well, as I've been saying for a long time, for quite a while now, I don't know who Jesus is, you don't know who, but I know who Yehoshua is. And Yehoshua is going to save them, and then they're going to believe. It's just that simple. And Paul even says it here. For Jehovah is able to graft them in again and again. If you were cut out of the olive tree which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these who are of the 12 branches of Israel be grafted into their own olive tree? They have a whole lot better opportunity, chance than you do, Roman. And you call them Satan's seed. You claim that they worship at the synagogue of Satan, and in so doing, you are calling your creator, Jehovah himself, Satan. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part has happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles comes to an end. Fullness of the Gentiles be come in, or the hourglass for the Gentiles is filled up. That means the time of the Gentiles is up, over, finished. And then what? And so all Israel, not the church, doesn't say church, does it? Nope. So all Israel shall be saved, because it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn unholiness from the church. Right? Wrong. Jacob. Because this is my covenant. Jeremiah 31 verses 31 through 34. Hebrews 8 verses 8 through 12. Unto them, Israel, when I shall take away their sins. Concerning the gospel, they might be enemies for your sakes, but concerning the election, oh, The election? You mean like the elect? Yes, like the elect. They are the beloved for the patriarch's sake, because the gifts and calling of Jehovah cannot be changed. So you're going to go and believe the lie. You want to go and jump on that bandwagon straight to hell. Where was I? Now we go back to the hoax of hate. The impact after the Bolshevik Revolution. Oh, there are a whole bunch of you guys out there, mainly white folks, who love to accuse the Jews of being the Bolsheviks, communists. Check this out. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, frustrated supporters of the ousted Tsar rescued the document from obscurity in order to discredit the Bolsheviks. The emigre-saurists portrayed the revolution as a part of a Jewish plot to enslave the world. Here we go again. As if the Russians didn't get enough curses for releasing this false document. They just had to keep on doing it. You'll see. And pointed to the protocols as a blueprint for the plan. The scheme of yoking the protocols to the Bolshevik Revolution not only led to the allegations of a Judeo-communist conspiracy, but promoted the forgery internationally. In later years, vicious Soviet, that's right, the communists, anti-Semitic propaganda under Stalin and others echoed the conspiracy mythology of the protocols. They jumped on the bandwagon too. This is why I say that what the world does is anytime something bad happens, they blame the Jew. International publicity. In the 1920s, two British correspondents, Robert Wilton of the London Times and Victor Marsden of the Morning Post, each of whom had lived in pre-communist Russia, promoted the idea of a Jewish conspiracy in Great Britain. 18 articles on the subject of the Jewish conspiracy as well as on the protocols themselves were published in the Morning Post. Marsden translated the protocols into English and in his introduction to the document asserted, "The Jews are carrying it out with steadfast purpose, creating wars and revolutions to destroy," and I quote, "the white Gentile race." That the Jews may seize the power during the resulting chaos and rule with their claimed superior intelligence over the remaining races of the world as kings over slaves. The Jews today have no such power. It is written. But there is going to be a Jew that's going to save them from you people. And he's the one that's going to exert his authority over you. A Polish language edition of the protocols appeared in 1920. The following year, the Arabs of Palestine and Syria used the protocols to stir up resentment against Jewish settlers in Fakistan, is what it should be called. Whenever you see the word Palestine, think of Hadrian and the mass murder he committed against the Jews, because he was the one who came up with that name, suggesting that the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine would further advance the international Jewish conspiracy. So then one has to ask, when you read this, who didn't believe the lie? Is there any group of people who didn't believe the lie? Makes you wonder. This propaganda tactic persist in the contemporary Middle East. Arabic editions of the protocols have been widely circulated by official Saudi sources, among others. Wow. Now we got the American debut. The protocols are publicized in America by Boris Brazil, a former czarist prosecutor. Auto magnate Henry Ford was one of those who responded to Brazil's conspiratorial fantasies. The Dearborn Independent, owned by Ford, published an American version of the protocols between May and September of 1920, 500,000 copies, in case you're wondering. In a series called The International Jew. Yes, folks, Christians. The world's foremost problem. So the series was called The International Jew, the world's foremost problem, or just say the world's worst problem. Now, see, here's how do I say this? How do you apologize for something like that? You know it's a lie, and yet you tell it. Why would they do it? Why would they publish this lie? Well, you can think of all kinds of things, notoriety, whatever. But what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians was accurate. Having pleasure in injustice, unrighteousness. That's the reason. The articles was later republished in book form with 500,000 copies in circulation in the United States and was translated into several foreign languages. By 1927, Ford had repudiated the International Jew, but hundreds and thousands of people around the world had been encouraged by his initial endorsement to accept the protocols as genuine. Wouldn't it be better to embrace the truth always, rather than to do what Gerald Ford did? You overpaid, overfed, undereducated football players. Look what the damage that Henry Ford did. It was too late to pull back then. And he did it because there was a very serious eugenics movement underway here in the United States, a movement that would attempt to wipe out the entire Jewish population in the United States. And I talked about that in my previous video. But the Nazis beat the Americans to it. Started World War II. And the Americans had to clean up the mess that they made and lost many lives because of it. The protocols in Nazi Germany. The protocols served to rationalize anti-Semitism, genocide in Hitler's Germany. The myth of the Jewish world conspiracy permeated Hitler's thinking, and he linked Germany's economic hardships during the 1920s to the secret plot. Once again, when something goes wrong, blame the Jew. Once in power, Hitler invoked the protocols to justify anti-Semitic legislation and suppression of all opposition to the Third Reich. For example, the first anti-Semitic measure in April of 1933, a one-day boycott of Jewish stores, was deemed a defense against the Plan of Basel, another name for the protocols. According to reputable scholars, including Professor Norman Cohn, in his noted book, Warrant for Genocide, the world control myth was actually lifted from a 19th century French political satire in which the alleged plotters weren't even Jewish. Made up out of whole cloth. And it was satire to boot. So these people go and dream up this wickedness at night, and then they plot it out during the daytime. Contemporary reemergence. Anti-Semites around the globe still actively circulate the protocols. It has even appeared in Japan, where bestsellers by anti-Semitic Masami Uno cite them as evidence of a Jewish conspiracy to dominate the world, and in Latin America, including Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Paraguay. The document also is favored by such extremists as the Ku Klux Klan and the Aryan Nations. And the most common U.S. edition was published by the hate-monger Gerald L. K. Smith's Christian Nationalist Crusade. Once again, I ask, is there anywhere in the world where this lie is not being told? The protocols have become a major source of Arab and Islamic propaganda. Between 1965 and 1967 alone, approximately 50 books on the political subjects published in Arabic were either based on the protocols or quoted from them. In 1980, Hazern Nuzebe, the Jordanian delegate to the United Nations, spoke about the protocols as a genuine document. In October of 1987, the Iranian embassy in Brazil circulated copies of the protocols, which is said belongs to the history of the world. Really? It's been proven to be a fraud. A satirical joke that somebody dreamed up in the night about non-Jews. During the 1980s, Muslim groups peddled the forgery worldwide. You ready for this? You want to know how Deshaun Jackson got a hold of this? Get ready. The Muslim Student Association at Wayne State University, Michigan, and at the University of California at Berkeley disseminated the document. American black Muslims groups have sold it. The protocols were for sale at an Islamic exhibition in Stockholm and in London's Park Mosque, and during a 1986 conference sponsored by the Islamic Center of Southern California, the protocols were prominently displayed. Based on a perverse interpretation of the protocols, the Saudi Arabian government blamed Israel for an attack on the synagogue in Istanbul in 1986. So I ask a question again. Is there anywhere in the world where this lie has not been sold, published, and believed? And now, folks, you know why damnation is coming upon this world. With Glasnost, there's also been a reappearance of the protocols in the Soviet Union. A Soviet book released in 1987 called On the Class Essence of Zionism revived insidious canards contained in the protocols and made repeated references to Jews engaging in constant efforts to gain control of the world. And the sections of the protocols have reportedly been read during the meetings of the anti-Semitic Russian nationalist movement Pamyat, which means memory. Now you wonder why, when Israel's real Moshiach comes to save Israel from the Gentiles, that the Gentiles are going to believe with all of their hearts, black, white, red, yellow, whatever race you are, you're all going to believe the lie concerning Israel's Moshiach. And you're going to fight against him. You're going to fight against the great liberator of Israel, all of you. Because you all believe the lie. Just a few spoke against this lie. Only a few. During the past 60 years, impressive authorities have publicly attested to the protocol's fraudulence. Hugo Valentin, lecturer in history at the University of Uppsala in Sweden, characterized the protocols in his 1936 study, Anti-Semitism, historically and critically examined as the greatest forgery of the century. Pierre Charles, professor of theology at the Jesuit College in Louvain, France, stated in a 1938 essay, "It has been proved that these protocols are a fraud, a clumsy plagiarism, made for the purpose of rendering the Jews idiots." People like Deshaun Watson and Louis Farrakhan and Shannon Sharp, yes, I'm calling you out, Shannon Sharp, you have the choice of finding out the truth. But you chose to either wallow in the lie, or as it is written in 2 Thessalonians 2, have pleasure in injustice. You say you claim to be for justice. You say no justice, no peace. You don't want justice. When you tell lies about the Messiah's kin, the Messiah's brothers and sisters, you went and joined the sons of Japheth in your slander of the Messiah's kin. In 1942, several prominent historians, including Carl Becker of Cornell, Sidney Fay and William Langer of Harvard, and Alan Nevins and Carleton J.H. Hayes of Columbia, introduced Professor John Shelton Curtis, an appraisal of the protocols of Zion, with their endorsement of his findings as completely destructive of the historicity of the protocols, and as establishing beyond doubt the fact that they are a rank and pernicious forgeries. And yet, because of people like Louis Farrakhan, Hal Turner, and many others, the lie is still believed. In 1961, Richard Helms, then assistant director of the CIA, stated at a Senate subcommittee hearing, "The Russians have a long tradition of the art of forgery. More than 60 years ago, the Tsar's intelligence service concocted and peddled a confection called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion." And yet, a good chunk of the American people still choose to believe the lie. Not only them, Russians, Europeans, Africans, Arabs, you name it, they believe it. And in August of 1964, a subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee issued a report repudiating the protocols, to which Senators Thomas J. Dodd and Kenneth B. Keating appended the following: "Every age and country had its share of fabricating historic documents which have been foisted on an unsuspecting public for some malign purpose. One of the most notorious and most durable of these is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. In 1935, a Swiss judge presided at a trial over two Swiss National Socialists, aka Nazis, charged with circulating the protocols. Wrote, in other words, folks, I want you black folks especially to listen here. If you're going around circulating portions of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, you're no different than the Nazis. Because you see, there was a trial of two Swiss Nazis charged with circulating the protocols. And he wrote, I hope that one day there will come a time when no one will any longer comprehend how in the year of 1935 almost a dozen fully sensible and reasonable men could for 14 days torment their brains before a court of Bern over the authenticity or lack of authenticity of these so-called protocols, that for all the harm they have caused and may yet cause, and oh my goodness, that Swiss judge was so right, 85 million dead people later, are nothing but ridiculous nonsense. So what is driving this particular book of lies to continually be circulated and believed? It is one word: hate. People who say these things, who quote these things as truth, they have hate in their heart. Their hearts are filled with hate. That's what was driving Deshaun Jackson and his mentor, Louis Farrakhan. And as, of course, the Anti-Defamation League points out, unfortunately, the judge's hope has not yet fully been realized. They forgot to point out that 10 years later, there would be 85 million dead as a result of this damnable book. But there still are those anti-Semites and their willing audiences who remain ready to circulate and believe this fantasy of hate. That's why I'm calling out you, Max Kellerman. You are the Jew on the panel of ESPN Sports. You are the token Jew on the panel of ESPN Sports. Represent your people. Point out the truth. You've got the bully pulpit. Use it.